Prime Minister, in February of last year, you texted Stuart Davey about Todd Barclay, and I quote, "He left a dictaphone running that picked up all conversations in the office." Why did he survive then and go yesterday? What's changed?
Well, that was in the context of an employment dispute. While now there is an understanding that was potentially an offence, at the time that was not the case.
So you spoke to the police about it in April, so that was absolutely being treated as a possible offence.
Well, that was later when there had been a police complaint made, but in the early stages of this particular argument, there was an employment dispute going on. There was a settlement of that employment dispute and a confidentiality agreement around it. And to all intents and purposes, that looked to be the end of the matter.
Isn't the thing that has changed that this is now embarrassing the National Party, that at the time, last year, this was behind closed doors. Now it is very much in public, and that's why Todd Barclay had to go?
Well, the reason, he's made a brave decision for a young guy in politics, decided that the position he got himself into was untenable, that it didn't work as a distraction from the government's focus on the issues that matter to the public, rather than the internal debate about what he'd done or might do.
But if it's untenable now, why was it tenable in February, March and April of last year? Why was it tenable when he was being reselected as the candidate for Clutha Southland? What has suddenly made it untenable?
Well, in our party, the selection process is totally devolved. It is totally the responsibility of the electorate. The actions I had taken were to pass the information I had to the electorate chair. The electorate chair is the person who runs the selection, which occurred actually quite some time later. I made a decision not to be part of this selection. I had no formal role in it. I couldn't be a voter or a delegate as part of it, and came to the view that the former MP becoming involved in this election, particularly one that was contested in this way, would probably polarise it in a way that was worse. But all the information was available. These issues had been canvassed publicly in the media, certainly known by all the delegates, because among the delegates were people who, as I understand it, were part of this whole process. So the selection was done by the people who should do it, in full knowledge of the circumstances around it.
There was a challenge just with the selection process. Was that then an effort to try and get Barclay after the picture?
Well, you'd have to ask the people who challenged the selection process, but that's a matter for the party to work out on a National Party on a procedural basis.
Prime Minister, I'm struck though, and all you say is true, but I'm struck by the fact that that is a micro-semantics argument. I'm really interested in, did you regard Todd Barclay's behaviour as tenable, as acceptable, as appropriate in February, March and April of last year? And if you didn't, why didn't you speak up against it?
Well, it wasn't acceptable behaviour in the sense of it led to an employment dispute with including with people who'd worked for me, who I regarded as quite competent. That was resolved then in the correct way, which was between the employer and the employee. The employer being Parliamentary Services, and the employee, and and then subject to a confidentiality agreement. So my advice to him was that wasn't good behaviour. In fact, to all the parties involved, that they could behave better.
What wasn't good behaviour? Secretly recording conversations in the office?
Well, there was a number of allegations around, and those have all been discussed publicly. But as someone who was not party to all that, the resolution of the employment dispute seemed at the time to deal with whatever the differences were, and I'm not aware of all the differences, and whatever actions he had taken that weren't acceptable.
So if they dealt with him at the time, why did Todd Barclay go yesterday? I don't understand what's changed. If the employment dispute was resolved satisfactorily at the time, and if you and John Key and other senior members of the National Party saw fit to not tackle Todd Barclay directly about what he had been doing, why did he have to go yesterday?
I disagree with that. This is someone whose actions have been investigated over many months by the police, right? So the information I had was part of the police investigation. The inference that nothing happened is wrong. There couldn't really be a much more serious process than the one that was initiated by a complaint to the police about the recording, raising a set of issues around offences, which I don't think anyone had occurred to anybody, that there may be some potential offence.
Did it not occur to you when you were speaking to the police?
Well, by the time there was a police complaint, then you could see the possibility that there was an offence. But earlier on, for those who weren't involved, it's hard to know what exactly happened. There was no implication of behaviour that could be an offence. But and nevertheless, whatever was part of the employment dispute, there was a police complaint. The information I had, I made available to the police through there.
Did the police approach you? Did the police approach you, or did you approach the police over this?
Oh, no, they approached me.
Okay. Did you give personal legal advice before you were interviewed by the police?
I did get legal advice, yes.
Was this covered up by the former Prime Minister, John Key?
No, look, I refute the allegations of cover-up. These matters were widely canvassed in the media. In fact, the police were investigating what, in a way that I think surprised even the people who may have been close to it, that it became a police matter at all. But I can tell you that made it clear it was all being taken very seriously. So the actions of Mr. Barclay were dealt with in the context of a police investigation, which is the most serious framework in which the actions of a politician can be investigated.
So if all of that is true, why did he stand down yesterday?
Well, look, in the end, these decisions aren't just legal or just political, they're also personal.
Isn't the difference that he was caught out? Isn't the difference that you have been caught out? Isn't the difference fundamentally that everyone who knew about this was quite content for Todd Barclay to stay until this became explicitly public?
Well, the people who determine whether he stayed in Parliament is his local electorate. And I think that's a pretty important point here that needs to be understood. The caucus, the leadership, the party head office doesn't determine the selections. The candidate is selected only by the local electorate, and the history of that is that interference from outside in that process always leads to trouble. So he had gone through, it's not a matter of people being happy with things not being known. In fact, this whole situation was very well understood in the electorate, as I understand. The piece of information I had been in the hands of the electorate chairman who ran the selection and had been for many months. So the people reselected Todd Barclay when there'd been a police investigation of the actions which did not come to a conclusion. Right, it basically said the investigation's over, we're not laying charges of any sort. In the knowledge of that, then the local National Party selected a candidate. So it was about as transparent and thoroughly investigated a process as you could possibly imagine. In fact, I can't recall a candidate selection that occurred after a police investigation.
What about these allegations that a National Party board member had talked to Glenys Dixon and asked her, encouraged her to drop her complaint?
Well, I'm not aware of any of the detail of that. I'm not surprised that she would have had discussion with the National Party board member. I mean, it's a national organisation. If you have a bust up in an electorate, and this one is pretty spectacular, then it would be irresponsible for the National Board to pay no attention to that. Now, just exactly what actions were taken, I can't tell you because I wasn't party to that. That's again, a matter for the party dealing with its party membership.
Can we
You're
talk
the
about your
party
role?
leader. I mean, are you concerned about, I guess, the brand of the National Party in light of all this?
No, I'm not. No, look, I think there's always political, you know, in a large group of political people, and we're by far the largest political party in New Zealand, at any particular time you're going to have some scraps. You know, the test for us and our brand is being focused on what matters to people, their jobs and their incomes and their prospects, and that's why it's important that this matter has been now dealt with. Todd Barclay's made a decision about it, and we're on the job today visiting Drug and Alcohol Centre to talk about the issues that really matter.
Can we talk about your role in this, Prime Minister? Did you or your office communicate to the police that you did not want your name and statement released as part of the Official Information Act request?
Well, the police consult about OIAs. They make the decision about about releases, but there's always discussion. And you know, as I said yesterday, I'm sure the discussions were consistent with the provisions of the Official
But did
Information
somebody
Act.
ask them, or did you ask the police not to release your name as part of it?
Well, I would need to check about whether that actually happened, but generally the police make the decisions about the release of the official
See, Prime Minister, how this is looking now is that people were content for this to be buried. A settlement was paid. You told Stuart Davey it was larger than it might otherwise have been for Glenys Dixon because of the violation of her privacy. Lots of people knew what was going on, but crucially, Todd Barclay kept denying it. You knew what was going on, John Key knew what was going on, and nothing happened until it was made public this week. Todd Barclay...
I simply disagree.
Sorry, disagree. What is factually wrong in that? What do you disagree with in fact in that question?
Oh, just that these matters were not only public over many months, particularly in the southern media. These matters were public over many months, and the police had investigated in detail what would normally be regarded as an aspect of an employment dispute, a difference of view between an employer and employee. So the aspects of it were not hidden. What changed, I think, yesterday, or in the last couple of days, was first that Todd Barclay made some statements which he then agreed were incorrect, and then his own personal decision about the situation that he was in, and as indicated by the fact that there was a great deal of interest in it. He felt it had had an impact on his credibility to have the whole thing presented in this way, and so he made his own decision about it.
How damaging is this for you, Prime Minister? How damaging is this?
Especially going into your annual conference this weekend.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's damaging. I mean, it's important that these issues are dealt with, but in the context of a government that has built a reputation focusing on the issues that matter, we're united government, cohesive, we deal competently with these sorts of issues, even if they're difficult and even if we're personally connected with them. I don't think today, I have to say, when I talked to the addicts today, no one asked me about Todd Barclay.
Why was the Leaders Fund used to top up the payment rather than the National Party funds? Can you explain that to the taxpayers?
Well, that's all been explained. It's the way that, the employees of parliamentary services, the people who work for MPs have the same employment rights as everybody else, and those were exercised in this agreement.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Prime Minister.